Hello, and welcome back to the UOWD On-Air podcast series. My name is Bola Ajike, and I'll be your host for today's episode on a very important topic that many students face, namely exam anxiety. Joining me today, we've got our student counselor, who is a CDA licensed psychologist and well-being specialist. Thank you, Dr. Diya, for being here with us.
Thank you, Bola, for having me.
Yeah. And before we start off, can we just acknowledge the fact that we are almost halfway through the year, right? We've got June coming up. It's just around the corner. It feels like New Year's was just yesterday. But I think that also means the big anxiety-inducing season is coming up, which is exam season and a lot of different essays and reports to submit. Now, I know that word, it's often really thrown around in a lot of different ways, exam anxiety, right? But what would you say is exam anxiety at its core root? What does that even mean, and why is it even an important topic to be talking about?
Right. I'm so glad that we are discussing about this, Bola, because this word, as you correctly mentioned, is thrown out a lot of times, but without real awareness. Mm-hmm. So exam anxiety, also commonly known as test or performance anxiety, is simply nothing but your feelings of stress, excessive worry, intense fear or discomfort that somebody experiences surrounding exam or academic pressures or evaluation. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that it actually manifests as physical symptoms, as behavioral symptoms, emotional symptoms, and even cognitive symptoms. And because we have very low level of awareness on the topic, all of those symptoms go unnoticed. So that is why it's important we talk more on the subject, build awareness, and seek support and early intervention for that matter to reduce this kind of, intense worry, intense tension during exams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what would you say is the main cause of exam anxiety? And touching about the symptoms that you mentioned, what are the types of symptoms that you can visibly see or even on an emotional sense notice when you're going through the season?
Right. So as I previously mentioned, it could manifest in different forms.
Yep.
So let's talk about the most visible symptoms first, which is your physical symptoms. You'll see that somebody who is having a panic attack or exam anxiety will sweat excessively during exams, and sometimes even before entering the exam hall or even during test preparations. So that's one of the most key physical indicators that somebody might be having exam anxiety. Then it could be poor bladder control. You'll see a lot of students when they're sitting for an exam, they just want to run out of the exam hall, right?
Yep.
And there could be symptoms like dryness around the mouth, yawning when you're actually not tired or sleepy, trembling, and so on. Now, there are also some other symptoms which are not so visible, but it might impact your academic success or performance during exam. So those are your cognitive symptoms, which kind of interferes with your learning or study habits. It impairs your decision-making skills, your problem solving, even, your retention, your memory consolidation. And that is why some students find it so difficult to concentrate or focus before or even during exam, because cognitively their judgment, their cognitive functioning is getting impaired because of this exam anxiety. Followed by that is your emotional as well as your behavior symptoms. So emotionally, you'll see you get startled very easily, you get agitated. Maybe you're not somebody who is short-tempered, but during those exam times, you get very quickly frustrated, you feel jumpy and panicky. Now that is also indicating that something needs to be set right in your system. And followed by also, as I was saying, the behavioral symptoms. Now, these are noticeable if you're a bit mindful about it. But obviously, most times it goes unnoticed. You'll see a lot of students right before exam face some kind of shift in their sleeping patterns or their appetite. Let's say they were easily able to take a power nap between studying, but as exam season draws near, they're not able to, take that power nap. They're procrastinating. They're feeling some sense of dread or hopelessness. Now, these all indicate that something is going wrong and something needs to be done about it.
When you mentioned about sleep and the changing patterns, I think that's something that every student knows about. Procrastination, staying up late, that's definitely a major symptom. So thanks so much for going into a deep dive into that. So moving on from that, what would you say are the different triggers that lead to why this is an underlying and systemic issue that we should really address?
Yes, I think it's important to understand that there could be different reasons for different people, but we'll discuss or touch upon some of the common factors that could trigger or push someone to have these kind of symptoms or signs. One of it being obviously the most common is, past experiences during exams. So if you've had a negative past experience during an exam situation, now that could trigger these kind of symptoms very easily. It could be also because somebody is perfectionist. You get so obsessed in doing the exam or the test so perfectly, you lose sight of the time or the duration. Or sometimes, people set such high standards or unrealistic standards on themselves, or if sometimes even they're set by others, right? It could really, impact their confidence, and obviously that will kind of put a dent to their self-esteem and intensify their anxiety levels. So these are these are rather the two common, triggers, which is being a perfectionist, dwelling over your past experiences. Also, some people, some of the triggers could be very situational. Let's say if you're sitting for an exam which is life altering, your career depends on it, there are high stakes. Now, those kind of exams could really, intensify your level of anxiety. So one has to be very mindful that as much as it's important, as much as this exam is important to you for your career life, but you need to be grounded, you need to be focused and resilient, right? And the last thing is, I think again, and the very common reason is the fear of failure. Before you sit an exam, you anticipate, right? You think of what will happen if you don't pass. So you play out different scenarios in your mind or in your head, and that could really impact your performance. It could really reduce your cognitive functioning, your attention, your focus. So it's best not to procrastinate, take one question at a time, go over it, plan, think about the time management during exam situation, and take proactive steps to prepare and deliver the exam.
Yeah, super wise words there. And I loved how you've sort of broken it down by talking about what exactly exam anxiety is, why it's caused. Let's now take a shift towards what the impact is. Would you say that exam anxiety impacts student well-being and academic performance? And if so, how does it do that exactly?
So the simple answer is yes, unfortunately. And it not only impacts students' academic success, but it also impacts an individual's overall well-being, causing insomnia, mood disturbances, even depression, self-esteem issues, which altogether impacts their mental health. So if it's left untreated for some time, obviously these symptoms will start manifesting. As I mentioned, for some students it will manifest physically, like having this common panic attacks or sweating. For some people it will start showing emotionally, always worrying, having negative thoughts. For some people it will manifest as behavior symptoms, sleeping troubles, insomnia, and the list goes on. So unfortunately, yes, it will not only just remain boxed into your academic life, it will gradually spread around different facets of your life. So that's why early intervention is important. It's important to try self-help strategies and talk about it, seek for support if needed.
And even speaking about strategies, what would you say are some strategies or techniques that students can employ to be able to deal with exam anxiety?
Again, a very important question, because there's so many tips, strategies available these days. And I'm going to take a tripartite approach to explain the strategies here, because I want people who are watching or listening to this podcast to understand there are certain things you could do before exam, you could do during exam, and even after exam.
She came prepared throughout to talk about all three aspects. I'd love to hear more about that.
And I would love to share some of the tips and strategies, because I often meet, and in fact in a day-to-day basis in my current job, and when I practice privately, I get a lot of clients coming and saying, what could I do differently? And I wish they would have come before, right? Or I get students who come after a panic attack, and I wish, they would have knocked my door before having that panic attack. And that's why it's important to create this level of awareness, that to take a proactive approach. There are some strategies you can master even before getting into an exam situation or having that panic attack during exam. So I'm going to talk about what could you do before, and I'm going to discuss some actually fun strategies that anybody could apply. So first and foremost, it's important to understand your learning style. Well, some individuals are very good with reading. They're auditory learners. So they read a book, they read the material or the PPT given to them, and they understand and they can deliver. But some people, it's not the case. They're visual learners. Even though they have all the resources available, they're reading, they're not processing. Now, that is the time to switch, change your strategy, watch a video on it. Some people need both. They need to read, write as well, or they need to see something. So incorporate all those strategies. Now, when you do that, also be mindful about information gathering. I think when you're preparing for an exam, it's important that you have as much information about the test as possible. And for that, you can, reach out to your professors, lecturers, instructors to understand the exam format, the exam content, what resources available, are there any test papers from the past that is available. So it's all about gathering information. So do you feel confident? So do you feel like you're prepared for the exam? It's all about that mental preparedness, right? It's also at the same time important, once you have gathered all the information about exam, actually to utilize it, right? So when I say utilize it, I mean you should apply some smart learning strategies. So let's say you have a big chunk of information to remember. Why don't you do something called chunking? Organize the information into small manageable pieces. So let's say you're a business student, you're studying lots of theories on business management, HR, different policies, global economic trends. Now box it, categorize it. If there are similar concepts, if they're sharing some attributes, make sure, you kind of categorize and try to remember it rather than remembering randomly. You could also engage in something called mnemonics or acronym building, which I often do in my one-to-one or group sessions with my students here, where we practice acronym building, where if there is something that they're finding it difficult to remember, we build a meaningful acronym out of it, so that if they can't remember the information, they can go back to the acronym and try to gradually piece out information from there. There's also one fun technique called visual imagery. So let's say you're trying to memorize the concept of supply chain management. The word itself has 3 words and it could be very confusing, right? So what you could associate the learning with some visual image, some visual memory that is close to you, that is personal to you, significant to you. So let's say you're studying with a subject with somebody or with a group of friends. They asked you a question. So remember, where did you study this content? What your friend asked about this? And then, of course, if you're trying to remember some dates, rather than just memorizing it, try and see, is this date closer to my dad's birthday? Or do you know somebody born or sharing, significant event of their life on that date? So give your memory as much as backup, as I say, as possible, so that if you forget an information, you'll have these cues to recall the information you're looking for. So yeah, chunking, visual imagery, acronyms could be really helpful when you're preparing. The other thing I would suggest before exam you should do is create an exam timetable. We as human beings are very conditioned to following timetable right from our primary years of life, right? So because in school you have a timetable, then in uni you have a timetable, in work you have working hours, right?
So, tell me about it.
So I think our brain functions well when we have a timetable or a schedule to follow. Yep. So build your study timetable. And when you do that, I highly encourage also leave some spots for your social activations or activities that you enjoy. Otherwise, this learning experience is not going to be enjoyable, right? So if you're, let's say, studying for 2 hours or you're studying for an hour and switching from one subject to the other, maybe keep 5 minutes or 15 minutes window in between for you to do something that you like. Maybe, doing a word game or solving a puzzle, spotting the difference, doing something that takes your mind off the subject. So yeah, keep those activations, keep those social activities, so that it's a fun experience as well, and not so stressful. Also be mindful about what are you eating, both during and of course before exam. Be very conscious about the amount of sleep you're getting during exam, and of course before that as well, because if you're not sleeping well, it will definitely, have an impact on your cognitive functions. It will, and it's not conducive to learning. It will impact your memory, even your recall of information. There are certain things that you can also do, during your exam. So let's say when you enter the hall, you'll have those nerves. No matter how prepared you are, you will probably, feel a bit more anxious. So the best thing to do at that time is spot something that makes you calm. Maybe it's it's an affirmation or inspiring quote on the wall, right? Or it could be the color of the wall where you're sitting, or it could be a pencil box or a pouch you're carrying, looking at it. Find something that relaxes you. Or you can chant a peaceful mantra, or, an affirmation in your mind, something like, I'm calm, I'm composed, I'm collected.
I'm keeping that. I'm calm, posed, and collected.
Yes. Instead of entertaining those negative thoughts and this anxiety, it's best you go with an affirmation and keep reminding yourself you've got this, right? Also, before the exam, if your invigilator permits, you could do a little bit of body movements, like, this hand rotation, little shoulder jerks, maybe a bit of cat stretch where you put your hands on the knee and just, slouch a bit in the front. It really relaxes. So these kind of things are really helpful during the exam. Also, time management is a big thing. So whenever you get the exam paper, it's best that instead of jumping to write and attempt all the question, you strategize. You spend good 5-10 minutes to allocate certain amount of time to all the questions, read through it, and attempt one question at a time. And there are times when you might forget something or your mind might go blank. So refocus, recenter, practice some, breathing techniques so that, you could refocus, come back to the exam situation, and start writing again. And I highly encourage, if your mind goes blank during a particular question, leave that. Go to the next one. While you're writing that, something might just come up and you might remember, and you can go back. Rather than procrastinating, worrying about it, just put a stop to it for that moment, go to the next question, and you can revisit the question later. So these are the things you could do, even during exam. The last thing I would like to add, which is also important, that one must engage to reduce, anxiety, exam anxiety signs and symptoms, which is what to do after exam. Because we sometimes dwell on the past. We sometimes compare, oh, my friend wrote this, I didn't, I should have written this better. I think it's best to avoid all this kind of rumination. It's best to move on and take proactive steps. You could instead do a reflection activity. What have gone right? What I could have done better? Or what are the strategies this time that helped me to remember the answers that you remembered confidently during your exam? It's best to do a reflection activity like that. Also, catch up some sleep if you can.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. I mean, every student knows the importance of 11:59 when we're submitting things at the very minute before the deadline. But if we're able to prioritize and restructure our time, we can definitely have more time for sleep. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Prioritize self-care. I mean, no matter how much we tell to prioritize self-care during exam, you tend to lack that, and you tend to compromise rather. So it's important that you do that after exam. Maybe take a nice shower and, prioritize your self-hygiene, eat the things you wanted to, grab a nice, share a meal with a friend or a family member you enjoy talking to, and please get some good amount of sleep if you can. Yeah, I think these are the things will help you. So you see, that's why I call it a tripartite approach. There's certain things that not only that you can do during, but you can do post and even before the exam to be more confident in exam situations.
No, I love that approach. And I mean, to all the exam invigilators, if they see us breaking a move or two, at least they know that we're not breakdancing. We're just doing a little bit of stretches. But that's absolutely amazing how you structured it down before, during, and after. And I think that's going to help students feel a lot more prepared to get into the exam room. Now, moving on to misconceptions. What would you say are some of the misconceptions that people have about exam anxiety?
There are quite a few actually, but I'm going to touch upon the most common one, which is a lot of people think that people who have exam anxiety are actually lazy. They're making excuses, or they're underprepared or confident. But let me break that myth and tell you, a person who is well prepared can also have exam anxiety, because certain things are beyond our control, right? Your mind can go blank no matter how hard you've studied. Something can trigger in the exam situation. So it's not about just being lazy or being underprepared. It's about sometimes, going through certain things in life which might have caused, for example, a past negative experiences that you've had, or a personal negative experience that you've had, which might kind of get very easily, shifted to your academic, life. So that is why it's important to remember that it's people who are complaining, or people who are trying to share about these signs and symptoms. They're not just lazy, but they're actually looking for some support to get, supported in the best possible way.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the long-term effects of exam anxiety on students?
Well, long-term effects could definitely start from experiencing chronic levels of stress. That could cause a lot of physical health issues, including some of the, psychological issues like mood disturbances, insomnia, as well as, behavior problems. You'll see there's sometimes drastic personality shifts in some people because they don't feel supported, or their, symptoms have been unnoticed for a while. So there's a long list we could potentially discuss about, but at the crux of it, it not only impacts your health, physical health, but it also impacts your emotional health, psychological health, and even your behavior.
Yeah. And I loved how you mentioned about getting support, because that's a great way that we can be able to, I guess, mitigate and manage this season. So how should UOWD students go about seeking support from the university and other people to be able to get through this?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because we have so many resources and so many different teams working to support our students. So at our university, we take a multi-pronged approach. So they're not just professors, academic support tutors, instructors who are there to help, but there are also inclusion team or academic success center who could help by helping them with their study habits, offering them some support related to learning adjustments. Then there is also a well-being team who could also offer some support in terms of helping students to realize, how social well-being is important, why emotional well-being is important, and so on. And then, of course, I am the next level of contact, where we have the counseling service, and we do not only one-to-one sessions, we do group sessions as well, where if a group of students are experiencing similar symptoms and they feel not so comfortable to do a session alone, but want to come with their friends and have a session, we do that. We do lots of trainings and workshop to train our students on the subject and to help them manage these kind of, exam anxiety signs and symptoms in a more effective way. I don't know if you know, but we also have something called peer support program, where we have a well-being community formed by some of our students, and we train them if somebody is looking to talk about this intense anxiety, not to a professional, not to a teacher, but to a friend, then these peer support well-being ambassadors could help them to talk, at least to give a listening ear, comfort them, or even direct them to right resources. I've also handcrafted some resources on exam anxiety, which is available in the library. So if you're studying or doing your study prep in the library, you could always go and pick some of the resources, read through it, and just know that you're not alone in this journey. You could talk to your professors, you could talk to our academic support team, you could talk to our well-being team, you could talk to our counseling services, and of course myself, the counselor of the university, who is ready to help you in the best possible way.
Yeah. And even speaking about the resources, I'd love to know a little bit more about that. What are some of those resources and how can students use that to be able to manage their exam anxiety?
Right. So let's do something fun, right? Since we are talking about exam anxiety, why don't you grab the envelope that's kept next to you and let's try out something, and then, I'm going to talk more about it.
Okay.
Now, when you talked about resources, this is something like, obviously, the resources that we have created. It talks about, again, the tripartite approach, what you could do potentially before, during, and after exam. Now, this is something you could do, I think, before, after, and even during the exam, if you're allowed to carry this envelope back. But definitely before and after the exam, if, you're feeling dizzy, anxious, you feel like you are getting a little panicky, and the shortness of breath. So this is called controlled breathing, or called box breathing, or diaphragmatic breathing, where actually it actually helps you to kind of restore your balance, promote the sense of calmness, because when you're doing this, it will actually help your autonomic nervous system to get regulated, which, as you know, controls your, involuntary functions like your heart rate and respiration. So when you do this box breathing, which I'm going to show you in a moment, you will see that, this stabilizes your heart rate, your breathing, and promotes a sense of composure, fosters resilience, and restores balance and control during exam situation. So let's try this out together. Are you up for it?
I'm ready for it.
Okay. So grab the bag, and I have used this popcorn bag because I really find it funky. But you can take any envelope or any, grocery bag, as long as you can put your mouth inside it, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So if you bring it close and put your chin and nose inside it, in the count of 3, we'll inhale, then we'll hold it for 3 seconds, and then we'll exhale. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, inhale. Hold it. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. Let's try it one more time.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, inhale. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, exhale. Again, let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, inhale. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, exhale. Right.
That felt good. That felt really good. Yeah.
I'm glad that you liked it. But yeah, the purpose of doing this, is we are breathing and we are not conscious of our breath work most of the times. But especially when you'll see that you're having exam anxiety, you realize that shortness of breath, and then you get jumpy, then you get restless, then you get all panicky. So instead of focusing on the symptoms, oh my God, I'm going to faint, I'm panicking, it's best to grab something. Even you could do it inside your pencil pouch if you have that, right? As long it's controlled, as long it's done in a closed an environment, or in a popcorn bag like that. This will actually help you to restore your balance, have some sense of, composure, which is important, especially in an exam situation where you need to focus, where you need to solve problems, and of course, where you need to even manage your time and deliver the best, right?
Yeah. And how can students go about seeking support from their family members or friends?
Well, this is a very interesting topic. As I said, there's not really high level of awareness on the subject. So it's best that you first discuss about some of the things you're experiencing. It could be a friend, it could be an elder, it could be an adult member in the family, where you could go about and say what you've experienced and what would you like to do differently so that those symptoms could be reduced. Also talk about seeking professional support for that. And our students are lucky here that we have a very well established wellness center where we have all the resources available, the trainings available. So if you could convince or have a chat with your family members and see, if you know they're supportive idea of to go and meet a counselor, and then of course you could do that. And outside of that, it's also important to give them a sense of why are you experiencing. So having that open line of communication, it could be because of the environment in the house, it could be because of sometimes the furniture where you're sitting and studying, the ergonomics, right, where your desk is really low, the chair you're sitting is not comfortable, you're always slouching in front, and then that causes a lot of, you know, neck pain, back pain, and you're physically tired. You don't even have the energy to study. So bringing these conversations up, what is causing, why it is causing, and what could you do about it? How can they help? Could they watch some, you know, informative video on the subject? Could they, you know, prepare something together that will take some stress off from the individual who is experiencing that? It's always having that, you know, open line of communication, being honest about it, and validating and acknowledging that you are experiencing those symptoms.
Yeah. I mean, well, you've heard it directly all from Dr. Diya, all these different resources and tips. So whether it's a popcorn bag or anything that's on the side, thank you so much, Dr. Diya, for being with us. This has been such a great and insightful podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much for having me.